Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as Brettonia against the Forces of Chaos on MP Peak Pass, and I'm sure you guys are used to me just putting up Brettonia replays all the time because I love Brettonia. But for once, it's not going to be the similar same strat I've been running with the Fan Enchantress. So, Chaos is one of the tougher matchups for Brettonia, the main reason being that they've got access to Shaggoths and to an extent Dragon Ogres, as well as Chosen with Halberds. Chaos can basically roll over your infantry, and they've got some really hard counters to your cavalry. And even Grail Knights, who are pretty good against large, will struggle, especially if, say, Kolek is parked on. Like in this case, my opponent brought Kolek. If he's parked on a more heavily armored, sort of tanky, durable unit, like, say, Chosen with Halberds, he can be an incredibly tough nut to crack for Grail Knights or units like that. And even Questing Knights, who, while they do have AP, just won't be able to get that surround, or they won't be able to maximize their DPS while he's crumping them constantly. And so Brettonia really struggles. They don't have the shooting benefits of, say, Empire, so they can't just rely on Black Powder to carry them through, which is what you see Empire do. People often talk up the power of Demigryph Knights with Halberds, but while they're all good, they suffer many of the same disadvantages that Heavy Cav suffers, so Empire usually ends up falling back on its black powder weaponry. And unfortunately, that's just not something that Brettonia can do. So I decided to make a build to hopefully counteract Chaos, and we definitely bring some units and some lords that I don't normally bring. For my lord, I did bring King Leuenker. You can see here, fancy schmancy on Beacus. It looks pretty badass. He's just an awesome looking lord. Decent armor. Okay melee stats, like they're solid. Weapon strength of 450, great charge bonus. More importantly, he's got a plethora of different buffs. He's got physical resist, he's got built-in, he's got the Ladies Champion, which is regen. Now this does get disabled if his leadership is broken, so do be aware of that. If you're playing as with Lewin and you get routed off, you're not going to come back and replenish your HP like with a lot of other regening units that just have vanilla regen. That is actually a bit of a disadvantage to him. Granted, his leadership is monstrous, so it's not that likely, but if it happens, it is a problem. Beloved Son of Brettonia means that if his hit points or his HP is lower than 50%, all units on the map that basically get Frenzy. He does have Foe Seeker in this case. I did bring Stand Your Ground. Lion's Shield, which I think is great. If your opponent brings Spirit Leech and trying to hit you with that, if they're bringing lords that do magic damage, if they have missiles that do magic, or just missiles in general, this is very good. It actually makes them like stupidly strong in, say, Skaven as well. I also did bring the Sword of Corone, which is a great AoE melee defense and armor debuff, which I'm hoping will help compensate for some of the lack of melee stats and defense that some of my units have. Now for the rest of the army. Frontline composed 3-foot squires, so dirt cheap, all things considered, but at least some armor piercing. So if my opponent brought a cheaper front line, these guys will trash them. If my opponent brought a more expensive front line, these guys can at least acquit themselves okay before getting wiped out. They are backed by a single unit of Beast Slayers of Bastogne here, who are there to provide some additional anti-large support, especially if my opponent goes ham and really aggressive on my backline, where I've got 2 Peasant Bowmen, one with fire, one with pox. Mostly these guys are there to just zone off enemy skirmishers, because of course Chaos, people often forget, does have skirmish cav, and they can be incredibly potent. Don't underestimate them just because it's not the forte of Chaos. In the back we do have a Damsel of Life, who does have Earth Blood, Regrowth, Life Bloom, Scroll of Shielding, as well as Power Stone, and then 2 Grail Knights. So not going too heavy on the heavy cav here, just 2 Grail Knights to give me some punching power, to give me something to deal with, say, Dragon Ogres, something to overrun backlines and get rear charges, but without committing too much. Normally I'd say bring 4 cav. However, we are, and this is really coming in on the Hippo in the room, or the Hippogriff in the room, we do have our Royal Hippogriff Knights, and these guys are a unit that is much maligned, generally not seen as all that good, but they did get a mass buff recently, which I was hoping could be beneficial. They do have a solid armor value of 90. Their melee stats are actually decent, 46, 34, not stellar, but okay. Okay speed, weapon strength of 135, charge bonus is reasonable. They've got Blessing of the Lady, they cause Fear, Terror, which is not bad against Chaos. So all in all, I figured they're decent, and if I can get, say, a surround on someone like Kolek, I should definitely be able to beat the snot out of him with all this power. So hopping over to my opponent's side of things, he's gone with a bit of an oddball build. He did bring a front line of Chaos Marauders, mixed in with 2 Forsaken. So if I'd gone with a cheaper line of Men-at-Arms, these guys would be monstrous. They would just dumpster they dumpster anything except foot squires, essentially just run them over. Forsaken would trash Battle Pilgrims. You could set the Chaos Marauders on, say, Men-at-Arms, win the front line, and be set for budget, on a low budget here, basically. They are backed by a good chunk of anti-large, Kolek, with with Star Crusher, with Standard Die, with whatever his Lightning Strike is, Lord of the Storm, Foe Seeker, Chosen with Halberds, the Summoners of Rage, who are very strong against Brettonia for 2 reasons. Now, granted, they're very squishy, so Brettonians can squish them quickly on the charge, but they do have magic damage, which is actually really strong against Brettonia, which has a lot of physical resist. And they their melee stats definitely decent. They've got decent melee defense, which is really, makes them really pretty solid in a drawn-out fight. Soul of Damnation, of course. Now, this is an oddball pick that I would never recommend against Brettonia, honestly. Brettonia just doesn't have the targets that make this one pay for itself. Soul of Damnation also, you're paying a good chunk for Soul Devour, which is an ability that procs. And so, one of the things immediately I had 2 goals here in mind when I was pushing in with Lewin. My opponent did bring the Soul Crusher, Soul of Damnation. One of its key benefits is Soul Devour, which when your opponent's within 200 meters, you get plus 40 reload skill, which essentially doubles your rate of fire. And actually does more than that. And that means that this Hellcan can do a lot of hurt very quickly. The problem is that it can get procced. It's not a targeted activatable. It's not something you can just choose to proc. It procs whenever an enemy flies within 200 meters of you. So here I sent Lewin out. My goal was twofold. One, to try to snipe out this caster, which my opponent made a mistake here. This is probably, I think, it was the second mistake my opponent made here, which is bringing a Chaos Sorcerer of Death mounted on Manticore. Don't do this against Brettonia. Brettonia can bring flyers. Even if they don't invest heavily in flyers, there's a good chance they can bring, say, a unit of them, and they will knock your Chaos Sorcerer out of the sky. And it's much safer to bring him on foot or bring him on a horse, where you can defend him with the rest of your army, especially if you're not bringing Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes. So my opponent here, with his Chaos Sorcerer of Death, is trying to flee. He does hit King Lewin with a Spirit Leech, but once again, I've got that regen. In the worst case, I always have regrowth, so I'm not really too concerned. And so we're chasing him down. Now, bit of a mistake here on my part. I didn't pull the Hippogriffs forward when I really should have done that. But I was a little worried that my opponent would have, say, horsemen hidden somewhere in here in the trees, or perhaps some dirty shenanigans like that, and I didn't want to get jumped and wrecked. So Lewin here, diving in, Foe Seeker active, is chasing in after the Chaos Sorcerer of Death. He whiffs there. One of the big problems with aerial duels is that lords do tend to sort of fall behind as their attack animation casts, and they don't get contact. Here he does land a hit on the Chaos Sorcerer of Death, who is in a very bad spot. He's not able to land, he's not able to escape, he's too slow. This is an additional problem with Manticores, is they're too slow. They've only got 85 speed, which means that basically everything except Harpies can actually catch them. Which is a bit of a problem. So you can see here he's trying to slug it out with Lewin, which is not going to go well. The Chaos Sorcerer does have some melee stats, and he is going to hit Lewin here with a Spirit Leech, but I'm ready. I popped Lion's Shield, so deny some of that damage. Hit Stand Your Ground, hit a bunch of buffs. Figuring that, okay, if my opponent does... And I do pull the Hippogriffs in to help Lewin snipe out this annoying caster. But I figured if my opponent decides to push in here, there's nothing he can do to save his caster up here. So his caster's as good as gone. He's going to get surrounded by these Hippogriffs, and he's going to get routed off. But unfortunately here, as he's running away, you will be able to see that it's a bit of a struggle to try to make contact. Despite us being faster, the Chaos Sorcerer is still moving. He's still active for some reason. And Lewin's actually winded, which I'm not entirely sure how that makes sense. But regardless, probably because Lewin traveled across like the whole map. But regardless, Lewin's chasing him. We're trying to zone this guy out. In the meantime, on the periphery, I'm doing the bit of a cowardly thing here and pulling back. Soul of Damnation has long since procced its ability, and so it's not going to be able to get that extra rate of fire. Kiting around the sides with the ground lights, my opponent can't really commit to this. They're fast enough to basically outrun Kolek, with the Hippogriffs still hovering here and as a sort of threat. If my opponent goes after my ground lights, I'm going to be able to double tap him with the Royal Hippogriffs and the ground lights. If he tries to go and dive into my infantry, he can't really allow himself to overextend too much there. There's archers, there's units like that, and the Royal Hippogriff is still loitering around. In the meantime, I'm using Lewin here to force off the caster. And you can see here, as Lewin, you can see, is faster. He's got 100 speed, so he's able to easily catch up to the Sorcerer. But as his animation casts, you can see he's not able to actually go through with the attack because the Sorcerer is still fleeing. This is a big, kind of an annoying factor, to be quite frank. You can see the Sorcerer just fleeing, but I figured I don't really care if I have to kill him or not. I just want to get him off the field. And so we're chasing with Lewin. Back of the map is over there, and I want to get him off the field for good. Meantime, over here, my opponent is slowly but surely waddling forward with this army, playing a little bit cautious, perhaps hoping I'd stop chasing his Sorcerer. But I figured, unless he commits, and I'm really forced to pull Lewin back to save things over here, I'm not going to do anything of that sort. I'm just gonna force that Sorcerer off the map, and so that's what we're going to do. You can see the guy is shortly going to flee, and we're going to throw things into fast forward a little bit here as I do start pulling King Louis back, and I probably should have fast forwarded a little sooner, but oh well. Now I do start pulling in with my infantry, now going for a bit of a pincer maneuver. You can't see these ground lights swing around the flank, hidden behind the hills, so my opponent's Hellcan cannot shoot at him. It is using its activatable ability, boom, but it doesn't last that long. I think it lasts for like 2 shots. It's not going to do too much. Plus it whiffed. And my opponent here is actually going to take manual control, which greatly improves the output of a Hell Cannon. So definitely a pretty strong ability there. But being in direct control, it does have its disadvantages. It means my opponent does not have You can see that shot as it arcs and it just basically hits those peasant bowmen really well. The problem is my opponent isn't paying attention to the rest of the field, and this is one of the other things with the Hell Cannon. Now, granted, they've had their accuracy buffed. The Soul of Damnation has its old school 40 ammo, I think. But to get the most out of Hell Cannons, you need to essentially micro them. You need to essentially dedicate all your attention to one unit, and it takes away your attention from everything else. And so my opponent here, focused on the Hell Cannon, trying to get as much value as he can out of it, not going to notice this deadly charge coming in from the flank. You can see the Grand Lines, you're charging into the rear of these unprotected Summoners of Rage. And while these guys do have that magic damage, they can hold out in an extended fight. The problem for the Summoners of Rage is that they do not have good armor. And so on the charge here, the Grand Lines just piling in. Yeah, they lose a guy. On the other flank, though, Royal Hippogriff Knights coming in. I completely ignore the Hell Cannon, because I don't care if my infantry goes down there. They're whatever. That's infantry. I want these Summoners of Rage knocked out quickly, and you can see we're just diving in, swarming, and my opponent finally does notice. He pulls the Chosen with Halberd in there, but it's too little too late for these Summoners of Rage. And you can see second lance here of Grand Lights coming in. The Soul of Damnation actually gets knocked off its mounting by the crew gets knocked off the mount by the Hippogriff Knights. The opponent casting Lord of the Storm. They're trying to recover, salvage the situation here. But with Sword of Corone going down, the Summoners of Rage are getting forced off. Louis is in there. These guys completely shattered, so they're never going to get used to their Chain Lightning special that's bound. Kolek here getting taken an absolute beating. Now my Grand Lights here definitely took a nasty hurt from the Chosen, but it's okay. You know, it's a trade. I still have heals. I can still heal them a little bit, and more importantly, we got an entire unit of Summoners of Rage, who I do believe are 1,900 gold investment, wiped off the map, which is really, really useful. So now my opponent's situation definitely looking a little dire. The Hell Cannon here has been taken offline. The Lance of Brettonia Knights piling in, slaughtering the crew. With 2 crew, these guys will never be able to fire again. In the front line here, the Beast Slayers of Bastogne locking down these Marauders. They're not going to be able to get much in the way of kills, but they'll hold up okay. Over here, the Chaos Marauders and Forsaken getting dumpstered by Foot Squires, who are just okay. The Foot Squires are not an amazing counter to units like this, but they're okay. Over here, the Forsaken, you can see getting diced up by the Foot Squires. So the Foot Squires are doing really well. They're cheaper than Forsaken by 100 gold, to be quite frank. And you can see the engagement going down pretty well. The Peasant Bowmen pushing forward. A bit of a mistake there on my part, simply slip up on micro. But as the game does wrap up here with Kolek routing, surrounded by Knights, my opponent does simply decide to GG, because at this point he just had no way to get back into the game. So a few comments on the mashup here, and a few comments on my sort of experience here with the Royal Hippogriffs. We got 2 chevrons on them, which is not bad. These guys surprised me with how much damage they did. Granted, it looks like it's only 5 kills. It doesn't look that impressive. They contributed a lot. They did a lot of hurt to Kolek. They did a lot of hurt to the Dragon Ogres. They yeah, they did a great job. So going through real quickly. King Lewin, obviously decent. He took a pounding from Kolek in the late game, and he only got 3 kills, one of which wasn't even the sorcerer that he chased off the map, so probably 3 kills on the Dragon or Ogres, which is whatever. But he did a great job with debuffs, his survivability, his raw tankiness there, incredibly valuable. The 2 Rail Knights, once again, they hammered my opponent from the flanks. They really collapsed those Summoners of Rage. They opened up a pathway for the Royal Hippogriffs. Within a few seconds, I'd taken offline the Summoners of Rage, the Soul of Damnation, as well as the Kolek Sun Eater. So huge value generated there. Royal Hippogriff Knights also providing some great support. And the Foot Squires, this infantry contingent, acquitting itself really well against the Forsaken and the Marauders. There are definitely no pushovers in that sort of situation. 2 Peasant Bows, doing well, not much, but not really much to do. For my opponent's build, a few critiques. 1, don't bring a Flying Caster against Brettonia, especially if you're not committing to an Air Force. You can commit to an Air Force if you want. It's doable as Chaos to an extent. Is it recommended? No, I would not recommend an Air Force build. But you can do it. And against Brettonia, maybe you can get away with it. I'd say it's better tried against other factions, like I'm trying to think, Greenskins, for example. I wouldn't do it against Brettonia just because there's that risk of an Air Force. But it can work. But don't bring a solo caster. Keep in mind the Manticore is incredibly slow for a flyer. 85 speed means it can't outrun anything, or almost anything in the air. So really pretty pitiful. That was one big mistake. The second mistake, I think, Soul of Damnation. It's not good against large or against cavalry. Hell Cannons require intense amounts of micro to function. It's just such a waste of resources, of both player APM resources and player skill resources, as well as investments in gold. 41 kills here against the Peasant Archers and Foot Squires, that probably generated like 400 gold worth of value from a 1500 gold artillery piece. Plus, the Soul of Damnation special ability is incredibly easy to proc prematurely. If you're playing against Chaos and they bring a Soul of Damnation, if you've got a fast Lord, a fast Flyer, anything, fly close, fly within 200 meters of the Soul of Damnation, get it to fire off its ridiculous ability, and we'll make it waste that ability. Sit outside its range for 45 seconds before gap closing, essentially, and push in. It's, in my opinion, something very much worth keeping in mind. Otherwise, not a terrible build. I would try to bring, once again, I'd probably dump the Soul of Damnation, downgrade this Chaos Sorcerer to foot mount. I'd probably try to bring some Skirmish Cav or some Hounds to harass the backline, and try to get some more Chosen with Halberds in here. You don't need the Soul of Damnation. Bring some Harass, bring an extra unit of, say, bring some Marauder, with Marauder Horsemen with Javelins even, or can be okay, or some Hounds to harass the backline, and then just bring more Chosen with Halberds. Chosen with Halberds are incredibly good against Brettonia. They give you an anchor point. Really, you could replace this entire front line with 3 Chosen with Halberds, and you basically got an adequate front line to back up Kolek, to back up your Sorcerer, to back up your Summoner's Rage, and make them really dish out the hurt, in my opinion. Regardless, getting into my opponent here, I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below if you've not already. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.